My son sold my Corvette. He didn't just sell a car, he sold my 1963 split-window Corvette. The one thing I ever asked him to never ever touch. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought the $50,000 he pocketed was the perfect crime. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He didn't know that the investment firm where he saw himself as a rising star was a company I had secretly owned for the past 5 years. He thought he sold a piece of my past to secure his future. He had no idea I was about to take his future. This isn't just a story about revenge. This is the story of how a son's greed led to the coldest, most calculated corporate takedown you will ever see. Before I reveal exactly how I dismantled his career piece by piece, I want you to tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Let me know and make sure you subscribe, because you are not going to want to miss a single detail of this demolition. So, for you to understand the cold precision of my response, you must first understand what that Corvette meant to me. It wasn't just steel and leather, it was a promise. A promise I made to my own father, and a promise my son casually shattered for a handful of cash. It all started on a Saturday, the kind of perfect autumn Saturday that feels like a memory, even as it's happening. The air in Denver was crisp, the sky was a deep, cloudless blue, and I had cleared my entire schedule for one simple pleasure, taking the Vette for a drive through the mountains. I walked into the garage, coffee in hand, still smiling from a call with an old friend. The garage has always been my sanctuary. The scent of old leather and motor oil, the neat rows of tools on the wall, it's a place of order in a chaotic world. My eyes went to the far corner, to the space covered by a soft gray car cover, the spot where my 1963 split-window Corvette should have been, but the space was empty. I blinked. For a split second, my mind refused to process it. I thought maybe I'd parked it differently. Maybe I'd moved it yesterday and forgotten. But I hadn't. That car had its own sacred spot. I walked over, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. I reached out a hand and touched the clean concrete floor where the front tire should have been. It was cold. There was nothing there. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a simple mistake. That car was more than just a classic. My father, a man who worked with his hands his entire life, bought it for me on the day I sold my first company. He'd saved for years. I remember his words, his voice thick with pride. "James," he'd said, "a man builds things. Some build with bricks. You build with ideas. But every man needs something real to remind him where he came from." It was a piece of him. After he passed, it was the one thing I had left that felt like I could reach out and touch a part of his soul. My son Alex knew this. He grew up in the passenger seat of that car. I taught him how to change the oil, how to appreciate the roar of that engine. I told him, "Alex, everything else I own is just business. This is family. This is heritage. You never, ever sell heritage." My hand went to my pocket, and I pulled out my phone. My fingers felt clumsy, thick. I dialed Alex's number. I was praying I was wrong, praying for a simple, logical explanation. He picked up on the third ring, his voice casual. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" I tried to keep my own voice steady. "Alex, the Corvette. It's not in the garage." There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Oh," he said, and the single word was filled with a performance of surprise. "That's weird. Did you maybe take it to the shop for a tune-up or something?" "No, son." I didn't, I said, the cold knot in my stomach tightening. I was about to take it out myself. Do you have any idea where it could be? No clue, Dad. That's really strange. Maybe someone from the Classic Car Club borrowed it? You know how those guys are. He was throwing out possibilities, trying to sound helpful, but his voice was just a little too high. His words were a little too fast. 30 years in business had taught me one thing. You can always hear a lie in the rhythm of a sentence. I ended the call. The lie hung in the air, more damning than any confession. He knew. I walked back into the house, my sanctuary now feeling like a crime scene. I went straight upstairs to his room. I had never entered his personal space without permission before, but this was different. This was an investigation. The room was messy, clothes strewn about, but my eyes were drawn to the small mahogany box on his desk where he kept important papers. My hands were shaking as I opened it, and there it was, tucked beneath a stack of old bank statements. A bill of sale, dated 2 days prior, for one 1963 Chevrolet Corvette, sold to a private collector I'd never heard of, and at the bottom, the price, $50,000. A silence fell over me, a cold, heavy silence that drowned out everything else. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. In its place, something far more dangerous was taking root. It was the same feeling I got right before a hostile takeover. A quiet, focused clarity. The lie on the phone. The insultingly low price. It all pointed to one thing: desperation. And I knew exactly where that desperation came from. Alex worked at Ares Capital Investments. He was ambitious, smart, but reckless. He saw himself as a titan of industry in the making. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had acquired Ares Capital 5 years ago through a series of shell corporations. I was the silent owner, the ghost in the machine. I read every report. I saw every deal. I knew he'd recently championed a high-risk tech investment, trying to impress his direct boss, a man named Marcus Sterling. And I knew, from the quarterly reports that had just crossed my desk, that the deal had collapsed spectacularly last week, costing the firm, and by extension Alex, a significant amount of money he didn't have. He needed $50,000 not for a new life, but to cover a mistake. He had sacrificed our family's history to patch a hole in his fragile career. He had chosen Marcus Sterling's approval over his own father's heart. I folded the bill of sale and placed it in my pocket. The paper felt like ice against my skin. My son thought he was just another employee at Ares Capital. He thought Mr. Sterling was the man whose opinion mattered most. He had no idea that the man he was trying to impress was about to get a phone call from his real boss. And that phone call was going to be the beginning of the end for Alex. He wanted to play in the big leagues. Fine. I was about to show him how the game is truly played.
I didn't call him back. I didn't scream or shout. An emotional outburst is a sign of weakness, a waste of energy. Instead, I went to my home office, sat behind my desk, and I began to do what I do best. I began to strategize. The first step wasn't about the car. It was about understanding the chessboard my son had just invited me to play on. And the first piece I needed to move was his boss, Marcus Sterling. I pulled up his file on my monitor. Not the public LinkedIn profile, but the internal dossier my holding company keeps on all senior management. Marcus Sterling, age 47, ambitious, insecure, a classic corporate climber whose loyalty was always to the next rung on the ladder, never to the people below him. He was the perfect instrument. He saw my son, Alex, as a younger, sharper version of himself, a tool to be used for his own advancement. He had encouraged Alex's risky play with the tech company, hoping to take the credit if it succeeded. Now, he would be the one to bury him. I let the bill of sale for the Corvette sit on the corner of my desk, a cold, white reminder of the stakes. Then I picked up my private line and dialed a single number. The voice on the other end was immediate, professional. "Yes, sir." It was Arthur Graves, the general counsel for my primary holding company. He was one of only 3 people in the world who knew the true extent of my ownership network. He was my ghost, the voice that spoke for the silent owner. "Arthur," I said, my voice calm, measured, "I have a task for you. I need you to place a call to a Marcus Sterling, a senior vice president at Ares Capital." "I have his file open now, sir. What is the message?" "The message," I began, looking at the bill of sale, "is one of deep concern from the board. The holding group has taken notice of the significant losses from the recent Innovatech venture. You are to express in no uncertain terms that we are disappointed, not just in the financial loss, but in the lack of oversight and the reckless decision-making that led to it." I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. Mention that a full, top-to-bottom audit of his division is now on the table. And use the word restructuring. Tell him the board believes a restructuring of the team responsible may be necessary to restore confidence. Arthur was silent for a moment. He knew what those words meant. They were corporate speak for a public execution. "And what should I say if he asks for specifics, sir? If he mentions your son by name?" "He won't," I said confidently. "A man like Marcus Sterling will be too busy trying to save himself. He won't defend anyone. He will immediately look for a scapegoat. You are simply to deliver the message and inform him that the board expects a full report on his desk by Monday morning, detailing who was responsible and what steps he plans to take to rectify the situation. That's all." "Consider it done, sir." The line went dead. I leaned back in my chair. The first domino had been pushed. I could picture the scene perfectly. Marcus Sterling, probably in his glass-walled office overlooking the city, would see the private number from the holding group and his blood would run cold. He would listen to Arthur's calm, dispassionate voice delivering a death sentence to his career. He would hear the words audit and restructuring, and his mind would start racing, calculating. Who could he sacrifice? His own neck was on the line. He wouldn't hesitate. He would look at the ambitious, reckless young analyst who championed the deal, the one who made the presentations and promised the spectacular returns. He would look at my son, and he would throw Alex to the wolves without a second thought. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, my private line buzzed again. It was Arthur. "The call is complete, sir," he said. Mr. Sterling's reaction was predictable. He was audibly shaken. He assured me he takes this matter with the utmost seriousness and that he would personally oversee a course correction. He mentioned he already had a personnel issue in mind that was the root of the problem. "Excellent, Arthur. Thank you." I hung up the phone. Phase 1 was complete. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a single threat. I had simply used the corporate machinery I had built to apply a very specific, unbearable pressure. Now, the pressure was on Marcus, and Marcus would transfer that pressure directly onto Alex. My son sold my Corvette to cover a $50,000 mistake, hoping his boss would never find out. He was about to discover that his mistake was no longer a secret. It was now the focal point of a major internal investigation. An investigation that his own boss was leading, with a mandate to find someone to blame. The $50,000 he got from the car would feel like a pittance compared to the career, the reputation, and the future he was about to lose. He thought he had bought himself a solution. I had just turned his solution into an anchor that was going to pull him under. Now, I waited. A cornered animal is a predictable one. I knew the call from Marcus would send Alex into a full-blown panic. He would feel the walls closing in. And when a person like Alex panics, they don't reflect or take responsibility. They look for an escape. They double down. I had set the stage for his next mistake. All I had to do was sit back and watch him make it. I didn't have to wait long. Saturday evening descended on the city. I was in my study, reviewing quarterly reports from a different company, a shipping conglomerate based in Singapore. To the outside world, it was business as usual, but my focus wasn't on the numbers on the screen. I was listening for the sound of tires in the driveway. Just after 9 p.m., it came. Not the gentle crunch of gravel I was used to, but a high-pitched screech as his BMW took the turn into my driveway far too fast. The car door slammed. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded up the stone walkway. Then, a pounding on my front door. Not a knock. A frantic, desperate banging. I took a slow breath, closed the laptop, and walked calmly to the door. When I opened it, my son looked like a ghost. His usually perfect hair was a mess. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with a frantic energy I hadn't seen since he was a teenager who had just crashed his first car. "Dad," he said, his voice breathless, as he pushed past me into the foyer. "Dad, we have to talk. Something's happened." I closed the door slowly, my voice devoid of emotion. "Something's happened? Or something has been discovered?" He ignored the question, pacing back and forth on the marble floor. "It's Marcus. He called me an hour ago. He was screaming, talking about some investigation from the main holding group, an audit. Dad, they're looking for someone to blame for the Innovatech deal." I remained silent, letting him unravel. "He wants a full report by Monday. He said if he doesn't have a solution, heads are going to roll." "My head, Dad." He finally stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I messed up. I know. But I can fix it. I found a way to fix it. This was it." The second act of his desperate play. I wondered what the lie would be this time. "I have an opportunity, Dad. A once-in-a-lifetime chance." He was speaking quickly now, the words tumbling out in a rush. "There's a pre-IPO tech firm, a competitor to Innovatech. Their funding just fell through. I have an inside track. We can get in on the ground floor for a fraction of their valuation. We can make back the money I lost and triple it in 6 months. But we have to move now, tonight." I looked at him, a clinical detachment settling over me. The web of lies was getting more complex, more ambitious. "How much?" I asked. The question was flat, sharp. He hesitated for a second, then took a deep breath. "I need $250,000. $250,000. He sold a piece of his grandfather's soul for $50,000 to cover a loss, and now he was asking for 5 times that amount to chase a fantasy. The audacity was almost impressive. "So, let me understand this," I said, walking past him towards the study. "You want me to give you $250,000 with no paperwork, no due diligence based on a frantic late-night pitch to cover a mistake that you made and lied to me about? He followed me into the room, his desperation growing. It's not like that, Dad. This is a real opportunity. This is how you built your empire, by taking smart risks. I built my empire, I said, turning to face him, my voice dangerously low, by never, ever mixing business with emotion. And right now, all I see is emotion. Panic. I'm your son, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. This isn't just business. This is family. You're supposed to help me. You're supposed to protect me. There it was, the core of his belief system, that my resources, my empire, my life's work existed for the primary purpose of erasing his mistakes, that the bond of family was not a source of love and respect, but a blank check he could cash whenever he was in trouble. I walked to my desk and sat down, folding my hands on the smooth, cool wood. You're right, I said calmly. You are my son. But at this moment, you are not acting like one. You are acting like a panicked employee who has made a catastrophic error. So I am going to treat you like one. He stared at me, confused. You want $250,000? I continued. Fine. Put together a formal proposal. I want a full business plan. I want 3 years of financial projections. I want a risk assessment analysis and a list of the principal investors. Have it on my desk by 9 a.m. Monday. My board and I will review it. If it holds up to scrutiny, we will consider the investment. The color drained from his face. We both knew the company didn't exist. We both knew he couldn't produce a single page of what I had asked for. I had not said no. I had given him the rope and invited him to build his own gallows. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The realization was dawning on him. The bank of Dad was closed. He was being treated like any other stranger asking for money, and his proposal was empty. Get out, Alex, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. You have a lot of work to do if you want to make that Monday deadline. He left without another word, the frantic energy replaced by a stunned, hollow look. He still thought this was about money. He still thought this was a negotiation. He was about to learn that the price of his betrayal was far higher than he could ever imagine. While he was scrambling to invent a company that didn't exist, I was making my next move. It was time to get my car back. The bill of sale on my desk was more than just a receipt. It was a map. It listed the buyer's name, a Mr. Alistair Finch, and a P.O. box address in Aspen. Amateurs. A private collector of Mr. Finch's supposed caliber would never use a P.O. box for a transaction of this magnitude. It was a flimsy attempt at anonymity, easily dismantled. I picked up the phone and made another call to Arthur Graves. Arthur, I said, my tone shifting from that of a father to a commander. I have a new objective. I need you to locate a 1963 split-window Corvette, license plate number 749, Alpha Juliet Delta. It was sold 2 days ago to an individual named Alistair Finch. I'm sending you a copy of the bill of sale now. I want to know where the car is. And more importantly, I want to know who Alistair Finch really is. Are we operating under the assumption that this name is an alias, sir? Arthur's voice was, as always, precise. Operate under the assumption, I replied, that everything my son has touched in the last 48 hours is built on a foundation of lies. I need answers, Arthur, and I need them by morning. I didn't need to give him any more instructions. Arthur had access to a network of private investigators and data analysts that could track a whisper in a hurricane. While Alex was likely staring at a blank screen, trying to fabricate financial projections for a ghost company, a quiet, efficient machine was already in motion, hunting for the physical manifestation of his betrayal. I slept for 4 hours that night. It was a deep, dreamless sleep. When I awoke, just before sunrise, my phone had a new message. It was a single encrypted file from Arthur. I opened it, and all the pieces clicked into place. Alistair Finch did not exist. The name was a pseudonym for a mid-level broker who specialized in discreetly moving high-value assets for clients who wished to remain anonymous. He was a middleman, a ghost who bought and sold for others. Arthur's team had traced the payment for the Corvette. It didn't come from Finch. It came from a corporate account, an account belonging to Sterling Automotive Imports. Marcus Sterling, my son's boss. The breath caught in my throat. This was a level of betrayal I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about covering a debt. This was a conspiracy. The story was suddenly crystal clear. Alex, panicked about his $50,000 loss, didn't just sell the car to a stranger. He went to his boss, Marcus Sterling, confessed his mistake, and offered the Corvette as a solution. Sterling, being the opportunist he was, saw a chance to acquire a priceless car for a fraction of its worth, while also gaining leverage over his desperate young subordinate. He likely fronted Alex the $50,000, using a shell name to hide his involvement. Alex didn't just betray me for money. He betrayed me for the approval of a man who was now holding his career and my car hostage. He had traded his father's legacy for a leash held by Marcus Sterling. The file from Arthur contained one final beautiful detail: the location of the car. It wasn't in some private, guarded collection. Sterling was arrogant. He had taken it to his private estate in Cherry Hills Village, likely showing it off to his friends, basking in the glow of his new acquisition. The estate's address was listed clear as day. A slow smile spread across my face. This was perfect. Sterling thought he had made a clever secret deal. He had no idea he had just painted a target on his own back. He had inserted himself directly into a family matter that I was going to resolve with the full crushing weight of my resources. I got up and went to my closet, selecting a dark, well-tailored suit. I was done waiting. I was done making phone calls. It was time for a personal visit. Sunday morning, while my son was likely waking up in a cold sweat to the impossibility of his task, I was driving. I wasn't driving to my office. I was driving to Marcus Sterling's house. He thought he was holding all the cards. He held my car, my son's career, and a secret he believed gave him all the power. He was about to learn that when you steal from a lion, you don't just take his kill, you invite him into your home. Sterling's estate was exactly what I expected. A sprawling, ostentatious mansion that screamed new money. It was all glass and sharp angles, designed to impress, not to comfort. I pulled my sedan up the long, winding driveway and parked directly in front of the massive double doors. I didn't wait to be announced. I walked up and rang the bell, the sound echoing in the cavernous entryway. A housekeeper answered, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of a stranger in a dark suit at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice calm but firm. "My name is James Crawford. He's not expecting me, but I assure you he will want to see me." I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but something in my demeanor must have conveyed that I was not a man to be trifled with. She led me into a vast, sterile living room with a 2-story ceiling and a view of the mountains. A moment later, Marcus Sterling walked in, tying the sash of a silk robe. He was holding a cup of coffee, and his face was a mask of confusion and irritation. "Crawford," he said, the name clearly meaning nothing to him. "Do I know you?" "It's Sunday morning." "We haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person, Marcus," I said, letting my eyes drift around the room before settling on his. "But we are business associates. I own the holding company that owns Ares Capital. I'm the man your board answers to." The coffee cup in his hand trembled. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. The silent, anonymous owner of his entire world was standing in his living room. "I believe you have something of mine," I continued, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "A 1963 split-window Corvette. It was delivered to you 2 days ago." He swallowed hard, the coffee sloshing over the rim of the cup. I don't know what you're talking about. I acquired that car through a private broker. A legitimate transaction." "There is nothing legitimate," I said, taking a step closer, "about coercing a desperate young employee into selling a family heirloom for a fraction of its value to cover a mistake that you, his superior, encouraged him to make. There is nothing legitimate about hiding your involvement behind a false name." Panic flickered in his eyes, raw, primal panic. His carefully constructed world was shattering around him. "This is about Alex," he stammered. This is a family issue." "It was a family issue," I corrected him, my voice like ice. "It became my business the moment you involved my company's assets and my property. You used your position at my firm to leverage my son's mistake for your own personal gain. That is not only unethical, Marcus, it is a gross violation of your fiduciary duty. It is grounds for immediate termination, with cause." The words hung in the air between us, more powerful than any physical threat. Termination with cause. A black mark on his record that would follow him for the rest of his career. No severance, no golden parachute, just public humiliation. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, his arrogance completely gone, replaced by the desperate pleading of a man who saw his entire life about to be incinerated. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, outlining the terms of his surrender. "First, you are going to walk me to my car. You will hand me the keys and the title, which will be signed over, leaving the buyer's name blank. Second, you will call my son, Alex. You will tell him that after careful consideration, you have decided to personally absorb the loss from the Innovatech deal. You will tell him his job is safe. You will praise his initiative, and you will tell him he has a bright future at the company." He stared at me, bewildered. "You want me to forgive the loss? To praise him? You want to keep your job, Marcus?" I asked softly. "You want to avoid a federal investigation into your business practices? Then you will praise him. You will make him believe he has gotten away with it. You will make him feel safe and secure. You will give him back his confidence. Because I am not finished with him yet, and I require him to be blissfully unaware of what comes next." He nodded, a jerky, puppet-like motion. He understood. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about setting the next stage of the trap. "Finally," I said, walking towards the door, "you and I will never speak of this again. You will continue to run your division, but you will do so knowing that I am watching. Every deal, every decision, and if you ever, for 1 second, step out of line, I will burn this entire mansion to the ground with you inside it. Metaphorically speaking, of course. He led me through the house to a climate-controlled 6-car garage, and there it was, gleaming under the halogen lights. My Corvette. It was unharmed, beautiful, a silent victim in this whole sordid affair. He handed me the keys and a folder with the signed title. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. I got into the car. The leather seat felt like home. I turned the key and the engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound that filled the sterile garage with life. It was the sound of justice. As I backed out of his driveway, I saw him standing there in his silk robe, a small, pathetic figure in front of a giant, empty house. He had thought he was a player. He had just learned he was nothing but a pawn. And now it was time to turn my attention to the king. Driving home, I felt not triumph, but a cold resolve. One battle had been won, but the war for the soul of my family was far from over. Alex would soon get the call from Marcus. He would believe his lie had worked, that his betrayal had been rewarded. He would feel relief. And relief makes a man careless. He was going to walk into his office on Monday morning feeling invincible. He had no idea that I had just rewritten the entire rule book of the game. I spent the rest of Sunday in a state of quiet preparation. I didn't return the Corvette to its usual place in the garage. Instead, I drove it to a secure private facility I owned downtown, out of sight, out of mind. The empty space in my garage would serve as a silent testament to the void that now existed between my son and me. Monday morning arrived, gray and overcast, a fitting backdrop for what was to come. I was in my home office by 6 a.m., logged into the Ares Capital Network through my private administrative portal. I had a live feed of the security cameras and full access to the company's internal communications. I was a ghost in the machine, watching, waiting. At 8:45, Alex's BMW pulled into the executive parking garage. He walked into the building with a stride I hadn't seen in months. It was confident, almost arrogant. His shoulders were back, his head was held high. He was wearing a new suit, a subtle display of his renewed status. He had survived the storm. He thought he was a hero. I watched him on camera as he entered his office. A few minutes later, I saw him pick up his phone. He was likely checking his accounts, confirming the $50,000 was still there. The money he had gotten for my car was now, in his mind, just a successful, interest-free loan. At precisely 9 a.m., my own phone rang. It was Alex. "Dad," he said, and the relief in his voice was so thick it was almost nauseating. "You are not going to believe this. Marcus just called me. He apologized. He said the holding group's concerns were overblown and that he had smoothed everything over. He told me the Innovatech loss was just the cost of doing business and that he admired my courage for taking the shot." "Is that so?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "That's quite a turnaround." "I know! It's incredible. And Dad, about that proposal for the $250,000, you can forget it. We don't need it. Everything's back on track." He was speaking with the breezy confidence of a man who believed he had just successfully navigated a minefield. "I'm glad to hear it, son," I said. "It sounds like you have a very bright future at Ares Capital." "I do, Dad. I really do," he said, the pride evident in his voice. "I have to go. Big day. Talk to you tonight." He hung up. The hook was set. He was comfortable. He was confident. And he was completely blind to the fact that his entire world was a stage and I was the one directing the play. Now, for Phase 3. It was no longer enough to simply take away his career. That was too simple, too clean. The betrayal wasn't just about business, it was personal. The response had to be personal too. I needed to dismantle the very thing he was most proud of, his reputation as a brilliant, up-and-coming deal-maker. I was going to give him the opportunity he always wanted, and it was going to be his ruin. I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur Graves again. "Arthur," I said, "it's time to create an opportunity." I spent the next hour laying out the details of a fictitious company. We called it Helios Innovations. It was a shell corporation, but on paper, it would be the most attractive investment of the decade. It supposedly held the patents for a revolutionary new form of solar energy storage. The technology was plausible, the financial projections were aggressive but believable, and the story was compelling. "I need you to create a complete data room, Arthur," I instructed. "Fabricate everything: patent filings, engineering schematics, preliminary contracts with international governments. Make it look like the deal of a lifetime. And then I need you to leak it." "Leak it to whom, sir?" "To one person and one person only," I replied. "A financial blogger, a man named Julian Vance. He's small-time, but he's respected in a niche tech investment circle that I know for a fact Alex follows. The leak needs to be subtle, an anonymous tip. Make it seem like Vance has stumbled upon the biggest secret in the energy sector." "And the purpose of this, sir?" Arthur asked, though I knew he already understood. "The purpose," I said, "is to bait the trap. Alex, high on his recent victory, will be looking for his next big score. He'll see the Helios story. He'll do his own digging. And he will believe he has discovered a secret opportunity that no one else, not even Marcus Sterling, knows about. He will see it as his chance to become a legend at the firm. He will champion it," Arthur finished for me. "He will bet his entire career on it," I confirmed. "And this time, when it collapses, there will be no Marcus Sterling to save him. There will be no $50,000 escape hatch. There will only be the consequences of his own boundless, arrogant ambition." The plan was in motion. A ghost company, a carefully placed rumor, and a son who was far too confident for his own good. It was a perfect storm, and Alex was about to sail right into the middle of it. For the next 2 weeks, I watched. I was a silent spectator to the performance of my son's self-destruction. The Helios Innovations rumor, as expected, surfaced on Julian Vance's blog. It was the spark, and just as I had predicted, Alex was the moth drawn to the flame. He wasn't just interested, he became obsessed. Through my access to the Ares Capital network, I saw it all. I saw his search history, filled with deep dives into solar energy patents and Shell Corporation registries. I saw the private data room Arthur had built being accessed again and again from Alex's IP address. He was spending late nights in the office, cross-referencing our fabricated data, convincing himself of its legitimacy. He was building his own echo chamber of belief. He thought he was being clever, discreet. He created a separate project folder on his local drive, codenamed Project Icarus. The irony was so thick I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't sharing his research with anyone. This was going to be his discovery, his alone. The moment I was waiting for came on a Wednesday afternoon. I saw an email go out from Alex's account to Marcus Sterling and the entire senior investment committee. The subject line was a single bold word: urgent. Attached was a 120-page presentation. Project Icarus, a generational investment opportunity in Helios Innovations. I opened the document. It was a masterpiece of delusion. He had taken the breadcrumbs we had laid and baked a magnificent cake of fantasy. He had built elaborate financial models based on our fake projections. He cited our fabricated patent filings as undeniable proof of the technology's viability. He had even, in a stroke of arrogant genius, recommended that Ares Capital move to acquire Helios Innovations outright in a private, off-market deal to avoid a bidding war. The proposed figure, $80 million. He wasn't just recommending an investment. He was staking the firm's reputation and his entire career on a ghost. The investment committee meeting was scheduled for Friday. This was it, the grand finale. On Thursday evening, I made one final call. Not to Arthur. This one was personal. I called Alex. "Dad," he answered, his voice buzzing with an electric, manic energy. "You will not believe the week I'm having. I'm on the verge of something massive, the biggest deal of my life." "I've heard whispers," I said, playing the role of the distant, vaguely interested father. "Something about solar energy." "It's more than that, Dad. It's the future. Tomorrow, I'm presenting it to the entire committee. When this goes through, it's going to change everything." He sounded like a true believer, a prophet on the verge of his greatest revelation. "Well, son," I said, and I let a note of warmth enter my voice, a final parting gift of deception. "I'm proud of you. It sounds like you finally found your footing. Break a leg tomorrow." "Thanks, Dad. It means a lot to hear you say that," he replied, and for a moment I almost felt a pang of something, but I crushed it. He had made his choice. This was the consequence. Friday morning, I sat in my home office, a single monitor in front of me displaying the live video feed from the Ares Capital boardroom. The room was filled, the entire senior leadership team. Marcus Sterling sat at the head of the table, looking confident, blissfully unaware that he was presiding over a carefully orchestrated demolition. Then Alex walked in. He was the picture of confidence. His presentation loaded on the main screen. He began to speak. And he was brilliant. I had to give him that. He was articulate, passionate, convincing. He painted a vivid picture of a future powered by Helios Innovations. He answered questions with a confidence that bordered on prophetic. He had every single person in that room, including Marcus Sterling, leaning forward in their seats, their eyes wide with the seductive allure of immense profit. After an hour, he delivered his closing statement. "This isn't just an opportunity," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "It's our responsibility to our investors and to the future. I recommend we move immediately to acquire this company before our competitors even know it exists. This is our moment." A silence fell over the room. Then Marcus Sterling began to clap, slowly at first, then enthusiastically. The rest of the room joined in. It was a standing ovation. Alex stood there, basking in the applause, a wide, triumphant smile on his face. He had done it. He had convinced them. He was a king. Marcus Sterling held up a hand for silence. "Alex," he said, his voice booming, "that was, without a doubt, the most compelling pitch I have seen in my 10 years at this firm. The committee is in agreement. We are green-lighting the acquisition. $80 million. Congratulations, son. You've just made this firm a fortune." Alex's smile was so wide it looked like it might crack his face. He had won. He had redeemed himself. He was a legend. It was at that precise moment of his ultimate triumph that I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the boardroom's conference line. In the video feed, I saw the phone on the center of the table light up. The caller ID would be blocked, showing only incoming call. One of the junior executives answered it, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Ares Capital Boardroom." And then I spoke. My voice, amplified through the speakers, filled the silent room. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. "My name is James Crawford, and I am the sole owner of this firm. Picture the scene, the sound of my voice, calm and cold, echoing into a room filled with self-congratulatory smiles. I watched on my monitor as every smirk froze, then evaporated. I saw Marcus Sterling's face collapse into a mask of pure terror. But most of all, I watched my son, Alex. I watched the triumph in his eyes curdle into complete, absolute confusion. And then, as the recognition of whose voice he was hearing dawned on him, pure, ice-cold horror. The party was over. A stunned silence gripped the boardroom. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Every eye was fixed on the small speakerphone in the center of the table, as if it were a bomb. "I've been listening to your presentation, Alex," I continued, my voice cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "It was, as Mr. Sterling noted, brilliant, passionate, convincing. There is only one single microscopic flaw in your analysis." I paused, letting the tension build until it was a physical presence in the room. "Helios Innovations," I said slowly, enunciating each syllable, "does not exist." A collective gasp went through the room. I saw Alex physically recoil as if he had been struck. His face went completely white. He shook his head, a tiny, involuntary motion of denial. "It is a shell company," I went on, my voice relentless. "A complete fabrication. The patents are forgeries. The schematics are worthless CGI renders. The financial projections were created by my accounting team 2 weeks ago for the sole purpose of baiting this exact trap. The entire company was designed with one goal in mind: to see just how far your arrogant, unchecked ambition would take you. And I must say, you have exceeded my wildest expectations." I let my words hang in the air, a death sentence delivered from an anonymous, all-powerful voice. Alex's eyes darted around the room, from the horrified faces of the committee members to the stunned, pale face of Marcus Sterling. He was looking for an ally, an escape route. There was none. But the research," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper that was picked up by the microphone. "The data room. I checked everything." "Of course you did," I replied. "The data room was built for an audience of one, you. Every document was crafted to appeal to your specific biases, your desire for a shortcut to greatness. You didn't perform due diligence, Alex. You performed a confirmation of your own fantasy." I then turned my attention to the head of the table. "Mr. Sterling," I said, and I could see the man flinch at the sound of his name. "You were about to authorize an $80 million acquisition of a non-existent company based on a presentation by a junior analyst with zero independent verification. You did this because you were too cowardly to question what looked like a winning lottery ticket. This failure of leadership is perhaps the most pathetic thing I have witnessed in my 40-year career. Consider your position at my firm terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building." Marcus Sterling looked like he had been turned to stone. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared into nothingness. Finally, I spoke to my son, one last time. "And as for you, Alex," I said, and I allowed a sliver of the father he knew to enter my voice, layered with the ice of the man I had become. "You sold your grandfather's legacy for $50,000 to cover a reckless mistake. You lied to my face. You conspired with your boss. And then, given a second chance you didn't deserve, you chose to fly even closer to the sun on wings of deceit. You didn't just want to succeed, you wanted to do it without earning it. You wanted the glory without the work." "Dad," he whispered, the single word a universe of pain and regret. "Please." "Your access to this building has been revoked," I stated, my voice flat and final. "Your corporate accounts are frozen. Your employment is terminated. You will be escorted out by security. Do not come home. Do not call me. You are no longer an employee of this firm. And until you understand the difference between value and price, you are no longer my son." I hung up the phone. On the monitor, I watched the scene devolve into quiet, orderly chaos. 2 security guards entered the room and walked toward Marcus Sterling, who rose like a zombie, his face utterly vacant. A second team of guards approached my son. Alex didn't resist. He stood there, limp, as they collected his security badge and laptop. He looked small, broken. The invincible king of 5 minutes ago was now just a young man in an expensive suit, being fired in the most humiliating way imaginable. As they led him from the room, he looked up, directly at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. Our eyes met through the lens. In his, I saw not hatred, not anger, but a look of complete and utter desolation. He finally understood. He finally saw the full scope of what he had lost. I leaned back in my chair and closed the laptop. The show was over. Justice had been served. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt final. In the quiet of my office, there was no applause. There was no feeling of triumph. There was only the heavy, deafening silence of the aftermath. I had destroyed my son's career. I had exiled him from my life. I had done what I felt was necessary, what I felt was just. But now, with the battle over, I had to face the hardest opponent of all, the man in the mirror, and the silence in a house that suddenly felt vast and empty. The days that followed were hollow. The routines of business, the cadence of calls and meetings, continued as they always had. Ares Capital was restructured. A new, competent executive was put in place of Marcus Sterling. The fabricated Helios Innovations was quietly dissolved, its digital existence erased as if it had never been. The machine I had built moved on, efficient and unfeeling. But the silence in my personal life was a constant presence. I would walk into the garage and see the empty space where the Corvette used to be. Even after I had brought it back from the storage facility and placed it under its cover, the space next to it, where Alex's car used to be parked, felt like a missing tooth. I didn't hear from him. Not a call, not a text, not an email. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Part of me was relieved. The other part, a part I tried to ignore, felt a dull, persistent ache. About 6 months after that day in the boardroom, I received a letter. It was postmarked from a small town in Wyoming I'd never heard of. The handwriting on the envelope was his. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The letter wasn't what I expected. There were no pleas for forgiveness, no requests for money, no accusations. It was just one page. He wrote that he was working at a garage, an auto body shop. He was sweeping floors, changing oil, learning how to rebuild engines from a man named Sal, who didn't care about his last name or his college degree. He said he was living in a small apartment above the shop. For the first time in my life, he wrote, the value of my day is measured in things I can touch. A balanced tire, a perfectly tuned engine, an old car brought back to life. I sold Grandpa's Corvette because to me, it was just a thing with a price tag. I thought its only value was what it could buy me. Sal has an old Mustang in the back of the shop. It doesn't run. He's owned it for 30 years. He told me he wouldn't sell it for $1 million because his wife loved the color. The last paragraph was the one that lodged in my throat. I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad. I'm not sure I've forgiven myself, but I wanted you to know that I am finally starting to understand the difference between price and value. I hope one day I can be a man who is worthy of owning something that is priceless. He didn't sign it with love, just his name, Alex. I folded the letter and put it on my desk, next to the bill of sale for the Corvette that I had kept. I had set out to teach my son a lesson about consequences. I had unleashed a storm of corporate power to obliterate his world, hoping the shock would force him to see the error of his ways. But maybe in the end, the lesson wasn't taught in the boardroom. Maybe it could only be learned in the quiet humility of a greasy garage, hundreds of miles away from the world of money and power. The story doesn't end with a happy reunion. We haven't spoken. I haven't driven to Wyoming. The damage that was done is too deep for a simple fix. It needs time. It needs space. It needs the slow, hard work of rebuilding, piece by piece. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't to protect your children from falling. It's to let them fall and trust that they have the strength to learn how to stand up on their own. I took away my son's career, his inheritance, his name, but in doing so, I may have given him the only thing that could truly save him, a chance to build a life that was actually his own, based on a value he had to earn, not one he could sell. I still have the Corvette. On some clear Saturday mornings, I take off the cover, get behind the wheel, and just sit there. I don't always turn the key. Sometimes I just sit in the silence, and I think about promises. The promise I made to my father, and the unspoken promise that someday a different man, a better man, might be worthy of sitting in the driver's seat. A man who understands that the real value of a legacy isn't what it's worth, but what it represents. And for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope. And so we come to the end of James and Alex's story. A story that isn't really about a car or about money. It's about the painful, brutal, and sometimes necessary lessons that shape who we are. The father's actions were extreme, a form of corporate and personal warfare that few could ever imagine launching against their own child. But it raises a powerful question. When does helping become enabling? At what point does love require you to be the villain in someone else's story in order to save them from themselves? This wasn't just revenge. It was a controlled demolition. The father tore down the hollow structure his son had built on a foundation of lies, not to leave him in the rubble, but to force him to build something real, something of his own, from the ground up. He took away his son's name, his career, and his wealth, to give him a chance at something far more valuable: character. And now, I have to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about this. What is the one thing in your life that is truly priceless? The one thing, be it an object, a memory, a principle, that has a value so far beyond money that you would go to any length to protect it. Let me know your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and these stories are a powerful reminder of what truly matters. If this story of consequences and redemption resonated with you, do me a favor and hit that like button. It's the simplest way to tell us you appreciate these deeper narratives. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We explore the complex, messy, and powerful dynamics of human nature every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching. And remember, the things that cost the most are rarely the things that are worth the most.